Well, Mr. Trump seems to be setting records all the time. He got more voters to turn out than any other Republican in history, and now he's raised more money in 90 days than any other Republican in history with small contributions. I'm Dan Perkins.
Hmm. Lies, lies, lies everywhere. Will they never go away? This is Don Mazzella.
It's time for Two Guys from Verona. Each week, you will hear from Dan Perkins, a financial expert, a regular columnist for the Hill website, and best-selling author, and Don Mazzella, a veteran journalist, author, and radio host talking about things that concern you politically, financially, and socially. They will also try to give listeners a heads up on future happenings.
Well, Don, we have a guest tonight. His name is Bryan Carpenter, and we, as you know, we spoke with Bryan on our other program a couple of weeks ago, and we were so impressed with Bryan and his message and what he's accomplished under tremendous adverse consequences. We thought he would be a terrific guest on our show. Bryan is a veteran of Iraq, and he's written a book called The Never-Ending Battle After Iraq, A Marine's Road to Recovery. Bryan, welcome to the show. Tell us a little bit about yourself, and then tell us about your story.
Yes, I am a 100% disabled vet from the VA and on Social Security disability due to the combat injuries. And it all started with growing up as a little kid and the Marine Corps being my dream. Well, I went to school. Just all I could think about was talk about and do my school projects on was all about military. And then when I finally graduated, I got disqualified for a small skin condition called gutted psoriasis, which is only outbreak of psoriasis when I get a respiratory infection, but it's nothing big. So I wanted the dream so bad, I didn't give up. So my recruiter had me go to the local congressman and my dermatologist to get a waiver letter written so I can get in. And I finally got in February of 2005. I left for boot camp. I graduated in 2004. Well, let me say that. And then I went to boot camp for 3 months boot camp, 1 month of combat training, 1 month of MOS. Came home, checked my unit, and they gave me immediate orders. I was shipping out to Iraq. Did a couple month follow-up. Went to Iraq, was there for 3, going on 4 months, and I had a roadside bomb, which knocked me unconscious. And the doc had to do emergency trachea on scene and nicked my carotid artery. Well, then they finally got me to flew to surgical in Balad, Iraq, and back to Bethesda, Maryland, in a couple of days in a 2.5-week coma. Well, in my coma, since they nicked my carotid artery, they had to do a 6-unit blood transfusion, which the body only holds 12 to 14 units of blood, so pretty much I lost half my blood they had to put back in. And when I woke up from my coma, I had a severe traumatic brain injury, 7 vertebrae in my lower back, which compressed twist fractures, shattered my pelvis in 5 different areas, which caused internal bleeding. So they slit me open all up and down my stomach. So the internal bleeding, and I shattered my right ankle. I got drop foot on my left foot, which is I'm not able to lift my left foot at all from all the nerve damage. I broke my xiphoid process in my chest, which is the bottom piece of the sternum. And then I lacerated my kidney and liver, which healed, though. And I think that's pretty much the main stuff. And, of course, a major case of PTSD on top of it from everything. And I just set myself to recovery. I dedicated my life, and I promised myself I was going to get back to normal because I woke up at 120 pounds and never supposed to walk again independently while being thick-headed Marine, very stubborn Marine. The doctors weren't going to tell me nothing. I was going to prove everybody wrong.
Aren't all Marines stubborn?
What's that?
Aren't all Marines stubborn?
Oh, yes, exactly. So that's I was stubborn to begin with before the Marines, and then the Marines just added to it and intensified it. So I dedicated my life and I was on med hold for 2 years, got released on disability and Social Security disability, wasn't able to walk. I was all still pretty messed up injury-wise, and got medically retired 2008. And then that's when a nightmare happened. I had nothing to live for, no dreams to accomplish, nothing to look forward to every day, nothing to fulfill my life or fit into society or give me something to do. So I ended up going in the bad direction, which is with living in a bar all the time. In 2009, I got introduced to a mixed martial arts gym. Well, I got to first practice, and I was like, holy cow, this is awesome. Even though I couldn't move the next morning from the first practice, I was like, I need to do this because this is gonna help me. Well, I would dedicate my life 2 days to MMA practice, and then in the mix, my little brother got into bodybuilding, so I got into bodybuilding with him in between my two practices. And before I know it, my physical abilities were through the roof, and I was doing awesome. So then I picked up personal training, which I call public training because I don't train people, I don't charge people to train them because I'm not certified for one, and I do it to bring members to the gyms that I go to because I work out for free with them since my story. So I started doing all that, and then the Cleveland Indians actually wanted inspiration to society, so they contacted the VA and Wounded Warrior Project to see what they had. And they're like, oh, Bryan Carpenter. Didn't even think about it. They said my name, and I emailed them my story, and they asked me to throw out the pitch for them 2012, ceremony opening pitch in 2012 for them, and that was the best day of my life right there. It was so awesome. And then right after the Indians pitch, I said, I need a new dream. Everything was falling out. My MMA gym closed down, and my training slowed down. I was like, I need something to do. So then I ran into a buddy, got me into firefighting, and I was like, wow, this can replace my dream of the Marine Corps, so I wanted to retire 20 years plus. Went to the fire academy and tried getting jobs. Nobody wanted to hire me. They wouldn't say it, but I'm a liability because I'm 100% disabled from all my injuries. And I just had to kind of hang up that dream because I couldn't find a job. And then finally everyone's like, dude, you've done enough stuff in these past 10 years. You should write a book. So like, okay, that's something else I can try. And started writing, and I got addicted to writing. It was so much therapeutic. It was so therapeutical for me to write my life on a piece of paper and relive all the feelings and emotions and situations I went through. And I was writing 4 hours a day. Wouldn't get off. I just wanted to leave. I came back. I just wanted to write. It was
Bryan,
so addictive.
What's the name of your book?
Never Ending Battle After Iraq: A Marine's Road to Recovery.
Well, how did you choose that title?
Well, I first decided on the battle after the war, but then I looked it up, and there was another book from a different country made like that. I didn't want to take another title somebody else had, so I was just contemplating and thinking and putting stuff together with a creative mind, and I was like, that does ring a bell. Never-ending battle after Iraq, because it is a battle after a war to come home and try to fit in society and try to deal with normal life without the Marine Corps name. And then the subtitle, Marine's Road to Recovery, because that's pretty much what the book is mainly about, is my awesome recovery deal.
Bryan, it's a truly amazing story. By all accounts, with the devastation that you had with the blood transfusions and all the broken bones and crushed bones and everything else and comas, you should have been dead.
Yes, actually thought I was going to not make it out of my coma because of my brain injury. I couldn't control my bodily functions, so they had to keep putting me out of it, and they didn't know if I was going to wake up or not.
So, is there a moment, Bryan, after you came out of your coma, where something happened to you that changed your life forever?
Coming out of the coma, yeah, it took me a while for my memory to come back. I woke up not knowing who I was, not knowing who my family was, not knowing I was even a Marine in Iraq. But once I came back to it and I was doing my therapy, my full-time therapy, I looked at myself in the mirror on my platform walker strapped in, trying to walk, and I was disgusted with what I seen. 120 pounds, skin and bones, and I could never walk again, which I was a very physical, athletic person growing up my whole life. And I was disgusted with myself. And I remember looking in the mirror, and I promised myself I will get back to where I was. I didn't realize I was going to go over, above, and beyond where I was and be in the shoes I'm at now.
What is your mobility available? Your mobility available for you to do today?
I'm very limited on a lot of stuff, like crouching down, bending at the knees, crouching down. I can't do it, especially if I'm trying to pick something up. I'm very unbalanced because I have half the use of all the muscles in my legs. I got muscle atrophy in my legs from all the nerve damage, so I'm super unbalanced. I'm always like kind of shaky and wobbly when I walk. I'm very unbalanced. I can't really bend over and pick up weights, and whenever I work out, I do like the laziest way to work out is I'm always sitting on a machine or I'm laying on a machine, so I don't have to stand up and stress my back or stress my pelvis and hips and all that. So that's kind of like I adapt and overcome. I adapt and overcome, make it look easy to live with the disabilities I got to live with.
Bryan, you sound like me working out.
It used to be like lifting the remote and drinking a Dr. Pepper, but I was like, yeah, I can't get that good at a workout with that.
Do you think, Bryan, that when you woke up and you were disgusted with yourself, did you ever think about the possibility that maybe the Lord had a mission for you?
I know what it was. At that point in time, I was like, I'm pretty much, this is how life is going to be for the rest of my life. And like, either I can just let it control me or let it bring me down and just keep me from getting up, or I can rise above it and make the best of what I was given. And that's what exactly happened.
Have you worked with a lot of other veterans?
Yes, I actually, when I was doing mixed martial arts, I became a trainer from the gym after about a year. They actually wanted me to become a trainer because I was so into it and I learned so much and was teaching so much. And any vet I'd run into, any Wounded Warrior project, I'd always let them train for free at the gym to get them into a camaraderie again, because the camaraderie is pretty strong with MMA gym members, MMA gym fighters, and then fresh vets coming out. I would help them with the VA because I went through the whole VA process and fighting with them and just dealing with them, and I just keep them in the loop of how it's going. And if I have nothing going on, I'll invite them all out if I got the number of contact with them, and keep them involved, keep them socializing with people, and try to keep their head on straight.
Do you see yourself as a role model for other Marines?
Yes, I do. I see them a role model. So a lot of Marines come up to me and they respect my story, and they'll sit there and BS with me with Marine Corps words and Marine Corps phrases, and we'll sit there and joke about Marine Corps jokes or just all that stuff. And I can relate to a lot of Marines, and they look at my story and they look up to me. It's kind of like they want to hit a bomb and recover like me as well, so they can be an inspiration. And yeah, I feel like I am a very good role model to Marines, not only Marines, all military and all people of the world so far.
Bryan, where are you located?
I'm right below Cleveland, right beside Akron, Ohio.
Mm-hmm. Well, and you talk about this gym and everything. Where's that located, and how you doing with them?
Well, the mixed martial arts gym closed down a little bit before I threw the Indians pitch out, 2012, but that was in Medina, which is right beside Akron, a little bit closer to Cleveland. And that's where I dedicated my life, pretty much lived at the gym because I loved it so much.
So what are you doing today?
Today, I'm still doing my public training where I have 3 gyms I go to on whatever occasion, and I will train people for free to bring them business and members to help keep their doors open since they support me that much. So I'm pretty much working out all day, and I come home and I work on stuff with my books all day.
We got about 20 seconds left, Bryan. Are you working on another book?
I'm thinking about writing. Yes.
I'm sorry, could you say that again, Bryan? I lost you.
I'm thinking about writing another book strictly on PTSD.
Okay. Well, that would be a worthwhile book. Well, Bryan, we thank you for your time, your inspiration, and your tenacity and your will to succeed and survive and help other people. It's been a pleasure talking with you, and we wish you all the best. This is Dan Perkins.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. This is Dan Perkins.
And Don Mazzella.
We're the 2 guys from Verona, and we've got a message from our sponsors. We'll be right back.
Welcome back. You're listening to Two Guys from Verona. Once again, here's your hosts, Dan Perkins and Don Mazzella.
Well, you know, another Don, Donald Trump, seems to be setting a new record, Don. That's too many Dons in one sentence. Donald Trump got the highest number of votes of any Republican during the primary season by a lot. He brought out more new Republicans than any other Republican in history. And now we get the information that after 3 months, he set another record of monies collected under $200, over $100 million. And as you pointed out today, people who were giving money to organizations against Trump are now giving money to Trump. What's going on? Well, I'm a person who has a passion for the American Civil War. Not so much the battles, but about the people. But there was one very famous battle called the Battle of Gettysburg. And there was a particular part of that battle called the Bloody Angle, and that was the high water mark for the Confederacy. When they lost the Battle of Gettysburg at that high water mark, they had to retreat, and then they fought a defensive war for the rest of the war before they finally surrendered. I'm beginning to think, Don, based on the polling data, that Hillary's high water mark was the Democratic Convention, and she's gone downhill ever since then. And I don't mean that just in terms of popularity, but she's also had a couple of problems. I think what's happened is that we talked about this some time ago. We wondered what the 47% number, that gaffe by Mitt Romney, which most people agree probably cost him the election in 2012, that 47% who probably never vote for him and will never get off of welfare. I'm beginning to wonder, when I heard Mrs. Clinton last Friday night talk about the deplorables, a basket full of racists and sexists and homophobes and Islamophobes and everybody else, if that was not Hillary Clinton's 47% crescendo. The LA Times, which is not a conservative newspaper by any shape or form, has a daily tracking poll, and they're showing that Mr. Trump is now up by about 7 points. The election is turning in key battleground states like North Carolina, Florida, Ohio, and Michigan. And in some cases, either Mr. Trump is dead even or ahead or slightly behind. But clearly the momentum is with Mr. Trump, and the money momentum is with Mr. Trump. Now, in the deal that I think that he cut with the Republican leadership, for every dollar he raises, 80 cents goes to the Republican National Committee and 20% goes to his campaign. He may, in fact, be the kind of candidate, based on the way he's managing his budget and spending money very cautiously. Hillary spent $100 million in the month of August. Trump spent about $3 million and uses social media very, very effectively. So he's demonstrating, believe it or not, his ability as a manager to manage resources. And now with the war chest probably of $20 to $50 million and $80 million, a lot of things are beginning to change. The polling data is making believers out of some people. As I said earlier, you told me about a person who was a campaign contributor now, but was against Mr. Trump originally. Excuse me. And spent something like $6 million as a never Trumper, and now I think you said he gave $1 million. The point is that the American public is speaking now with their wallets in the amount of money that they're contributing to the Trump campaign, trying to get as much money for advertising, promotion, and whatever. But I don't think he's going to spend it imprudently. I think he's going to use his money well, and he's going to manage his campaign as he has done in the past. So money is important, but I think being a good steward of the money and using it as best you possibly can. His latest television messages are about the deplorable basket. I think they're very effective advertising, and I think it's galvanized people. And I wonder, Don, if I could ask you a question. If he's up 7 now, is there a number in the next few weeks or after the debate, if he does well, that the Democrats will capitulate in terms of backing off on their support of Hillary?
I think they're backing off already on their support of him. My favorite political scientist is V.O. Key, who wrote many years ago, but he's still apt. People make up their mind right after Labor Day in the presidential race, and very seldom do they change. All of this that's happening, the money, the polling, everything is pointing that Trump is trending positively and Hillary's trending negatively. They're the only hope the Democratic Party has is that Donald Trump will make a mistake. I think it's his to lose now rather than hers to win. So I don't know if I've answered your question, Dan, but I just wanted to point up something. Yesterday on NPR's television program, we had 3 women correspondents trying to walk back Hillary's comment about deplorable and said it was off the cuff, when we all know that it was written into her teleprompter.
Right.
And that's the new mantra, that it was off the cuff. So when you start walking back things like that, you know you're in trouble.
Yeah. Well, we need to take a break. So this is Dan Perkins.
Don Mazzella.
We're the 2 guys from Verona. Go to our website, twoguysfromverona.com, and you can see next week's guest and some other information.
Welcome back. You're listening to 2 Guys from Verona. Once again, here's your hosts, Dan Perkins and Don Mazzella.
You know, Dan, yesterday in the Bergen Record, which has just been taken over by the Gannett chain, which puts out USA Today, there's a great cartoon. There's a picture of George Washington saying, he's running for office. I told you I cannot tell a lie. And his campaign manager is saying, great, here's your concession speech and a ticket back to Mount Vernon. I mean, it's a sad state of affairs. You know, when we went to school, they talked about how he couldn't tell a lie when he chopped down the cherry tree.
Right.
Well, that's not even in the school books anymore. It was very interesting. I was someplace today, Saturday, giving a talk, and we had a fairly young audience. And when I spoke about the cherry tree, they looked at me with blank expression. And I asked a simple question: how many of you had heard the story of George Washington and the cherry tree? And it was sad. Not a single younger person knew it.
Amazing.
That's how. But anyway, that's my lead into my topic, which is lies, lies, lies. What did Mark Twain say? There are liars, then there are damn liars. We've reached a point in this campaign. E.J. Dionne, who's a columnist, had a column in today's paper in which he deplored the media for not going after Donald Trump's lies while focusing in on Hillary's lies. As he pointed out, Donald Trump has been shown by political fact to be wrong more times than he's right. But still, the country seems to be focusing on Hillary and how she's handled this email, how she's handled the nonprofit group. By the way, tomorrow coming out on the Wall Street Journal is another hit at Bill Clinton, where he was given a speech for $500,000. Then the foundation gave the company that paid the money a contract for Haiti, which is another cesspool. We're seeing lies, and we're seeing more and more lies in this campaign, particularly from the Hillary people. Um, I'm sorry to see that because we used to, in American politics, value the lies, value the truth, not the lies. We seem in this election to value the lies and not the truth. And speaking of that, I'll throw it back to you about our good president.
Well, it's interesting what you're talking about because people seem to want to support Hillary whether she tells the truth or not. And I did a piece for one of my commentaries. There are lies and there are lies. It's just like there are negatives and there are negatives. I think the negatives associated to Mr. Trump, by and large, are about personality. The negatives of Mrs. Clinton are about integrity, honesty, and those are different. Those are different negatives. Those are negatives that deal with core moral compass. A lion or a tiger can change their spots, but I'm not sure a habitual liar can ever begin to start telling the truth more than they lie. I think it's important. You briefly mentioned the foundation. There was a report this week that for the tax year of 2014, the foundation brought in something like $91 million, and 5.7% went to distribution to charities. The rest went to overhead, travel expenses, and salaries. So very small amount of money. There are continuing to be articles about closing it down, but there doesn't seem to be any interest in closing it down until a decision is made on whether or not she's going to be elected. It's interesting. We talked about. I asked kind of the rhetorical question in our show prep: did Barack Obama go to the Hillary Clinton School of Lies, which her husband was the chancellor? Or did she go to the Barack Obama School of Lies? I don't know which. But it is amazing that they both continue to stand up in front of the American people and lie. We had a situation on the bombing in New York City over the weekend where Mrs. Clinton, before the government declared it was a bomb and that it was a bombing, she said on her plane in a very monotone, totally distracted, lack of interest approach that it was a bomb. And yet the next morning she came out and accused Trump of calling it a bomb before it was announced a bomb. So what happened was that CNN, the Clinton News Network, went back and re-edited her statement from the night before and took out her reference to the word bomb. It's
Well,
like,
you know what they call CNN, don't you?
The Clinton
The
News
Clinton
Network.
News Network.
Yeah. And so, but my concern was, well, wait a minute here. We've got a situation where the news media, how stupid do they think we are? If they're the only media that went through and edited out her discussion about bomb and then said she never said it, what about the rest of the news media who didn't edit it out? It's a lie from the network and a manipulation try to manipulate the American people to say something that wasn't really there. And so again, we have not only the candidate, Mrs. Clinton, the president lying. Now we have the news media lying, and you mentioned earlier in the show about 3 people on yesterday on PBS trying to convince that the comments on Friday night about the deplorables was a gaffe, and you're right. We both saw that it was on the television monitor. Well, we're out of time for this segment, but Bill, this is Dan Perkins
And Don Mazzella.
and remember, if it's important to you, it's important to us. We'll be right back after these messages.
You're listening to Two Guys from Verona. In this final segment, Don and Dan offer their predictions on what's going to happen in our world.
Well, we got a lot of things to cover here, so let's get to it. I said some time ago when the president told the American people when he stood at the podium and he looked at the American people and he said, the reason why we put $400 million in 100 franc and 100 euro notes and put them in an airplane and flew them to Tehran, that it wasn't ransom. He said that the reason we did it that way is that under the economic sanctions, there was no ability to wire money to the Iranian government. Well, we found out today from the Treasury Department that prior to that transaction, on at least 2 occasions, the United States government wired money to Iran. So we have the president standing there in front of us, one, lying about it wasn't ransom, when the hostages told us after they got out that they were told that they would not be released until the plane with the money was landed. We got the president telling us it wasn't ransom, and he tells us that they couldn't wire the money. So he lied to us twice. Now, I know that the last segment we talked about was lies and lies, and then more lies. But this one is particularly bothersome. When the President of the United States says that we didn't pay ransom, and the reason why we sent cash is because we didn't have the ability to wire money. Now, I've concluded 2 things. Either he was lying, or he is inept and not informed. That people on his staff had already wired money prior to that transaction, and they either didn't tell him, he didn't know, or he forgot, or he just flat out lied. It just seems to me that it's amazing. I go back to Mrs. Clinton's husband, Bill Clinton, standing in front of the cameras on the podium, shaking his finger at the American people, saying he did not have sex with that woman, Miss Lewinsky. And I'm going back to do the people's work. President of the United States, as you said earlier, the Democrats must be better liars or more liars, because the number of people who accept it, even though that's been proven to be a lie, is amazing to me. Don?
Well, there's several things that are bothering me. Number one, North Korea, I've been told by reliable sources, is going to prove to be a very troublesome international player over the next 3 months. In particular, before the election and certainly afterwards. That's number one. Number two, we have Secretary of State Kerry once more trying to play a Defense Department head and compromising American intelligence, because the deal that he worked out with the Russians over Syria requires the American military to reveal their sources of information. And I'm told that the Defense Department has flatly refused to. As a consequence of that, I'm sure you read about this convoy that was attacked by planes.
Right.
Well, it turns out, and it appears now, that it was a deliberate act by the Russians to force the Americans to share intelligence. That is, to me, a very, very ominous turn of events if they turn out to be true. The third thing is, we were talking to a guest on the Jiggy January show. Russia and Iran are rapidly seeking a rapprochement, as the guest of that program pointed out. Their window for committing any sort of action is rapidly narrowing. But after that broadcast, I called a friend of mine who's an expert on Russian affairs, and he said, whatever people forget one thing about the Russian people, they will suffer greatly if they're properly motivated to lead. And he said, do not forget how many Russians died in World War II, and do not forget that Putin has the ability to galvanize them. So But he agrees with me. The smart thing for our foreign enemies is to keep quiet. The dumb thing to do before the election. But it's probable that something will happen before the election, which will force President Obama to once more uh, create a line in the sand and then retreat. Back to you.
So what you're saying is that your source on Russia is that that Putin is the aggressor here. What does he want?
What he's getting, a dominant role in the Mideast. He's getting. Don't forget, Kerry's very simple. Kerry is going to Moscow. Moscow is not coming here. They're not meeting him halfway. I mean, people look at things like that. They're important to diplomats. I'm told that there's a war going on in the State Department and the CIA, because don't forget, there are a lot of valuable assets on the ground in Syria, which our governments do not want to share with the Russians. I'm told we have a very good network of ways of knowing what's going on inside the battlegrounds, ISIS battlegrounds, including, I'm told for the first time, inside the ISIS territories themselves. But the Russians want to share in that information, and Kerry has agreed to it, but the State Department has not. Not the State Department, the
Department of
Defense
Defense.
Department.
So did I hear improperly? Did I hear that the United States government, the president, apologized for the attacking of that column, that it was a mistake?
Oh, I haven't seen all the details on it.
Okay.
We did not. The Wall Street Journal is coming out with a story that says the American intelligence people have found out that it was the Russians that did it, not the Syrians, not the Americans, but the Americans can do it very well. And by the way, I'm told that they have satellite pictures of the actual attack.
Okay. Well, speaking of an attack, let's deal with my next subject, and that is a very disturbing piece that I saw over the last few days about the euthanasia outbreak in Europe, and more specifically in Belgium. Right now, about every 4 hours, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, with no stop, somebody is put to death through euthanasia in the country of Belgium. And their government is now deciding whether or not they want to change the law, which prohibits it to children under 12 years of age to basically put an unrestricted euthanasia provision. And I think about that and I wonder, where did the world go wrong? How is deciding, as I was speaking to my Admiral friend at lunch today, how do you decide when a person should live or die? And who makes that decision? My brother, who is a very brilliant man, for years was a Georgetown University trained bioethicist. And he worked in the hospitals on the Upper East Side of New York, Columbia Presbyterian, Mount Sinai, Rockefeller Hospital for Special Surgery, and I forget what the fifth one was, but he was a bioethicist that did consulting to family members, to patients, and to the clinicians in these hospitals about end-of-life issues, because it's always a difficult problem. But his philosophy was there is a natural process, and we should try and keep the patient as pain-free as possible, keep them hydrated, and let the natural processes take over. But here, the government is saying that we don't want the natural processes to take over. For whatever reason, we can end life. And, you know, Don, the more I thought about it, and as I was talking to my Admiral friend today at lunch, I said, how's that different than Russia? How is that different from what they did in killing all those people? How is it different from the Nazis in Germany killing all of those people? They made the decision as to who was going to live and who was going to die. It seems to me that this is a further example of the degradation of the moral fiber of the world. And it bothers me no end that we value life so little that we're going to decide when it's going to end and interrupt the natural process. Don, we got a couple minutes.
Well, I was going to say two things. Don't forget, embedded within the Accountable Care Act is the ability to create, in effect, end-of-life committees, as people wanted to say, because they would be empowered to decide whether to withhold treatment or not. It hasn't been implemented yet, but it's there. And people that say it's not there don't know what they're talking about, because it's right there. I used to know the page number. It's like 4,600 something. That's number one. And number two, have you ever seen a movie called Soylent Green?
Yes.
I mean, if you think about it, then start. I know Edward G. Robinson, but the point being, they were sacrificing people in order to eat. Mm-hmm. But the point is, that movie was accepted. The premise was accepted, and that was scary. Back to you.
Yeah, I remember seeing that movie and seeing that it was accepted. I remember there was a time early on when they were discussing Obamacare. I don't know whether it was a town hall meeting or what it was, but somebody asked Obama, well, what if my mother needed some certain care? She had an incurable illness. And I believe that the president responded, well, depending upon her age, it may not make sense to spend the amount of money that you want to talk about to giving her treatment just simply to extend her life. And maybe the best thing that she can do is, take a couple aspirin and deal with it tomorrow. That showed to me the callous of the president in dealing with end-of-life issues. But life doesn't really count. It doesn't matter to some of these people on the left who question whether or not people should have the right to decide when and how they die.
Except when it comes to themselves. That's the difference.
That's a different story.
You notice they don't go to the Washington schools. They send them to private schools, including the president.
Right. Well, we're just about out of time, so we thank you for joining us today. And this is Dan Perkins.
Don Mazzella.
We're the Two Guys from Verona, and you can go to our website, twoguysfromverona.com. You can leave us a message. You can click onto there and pick up Don's website and my website and see what we have to offer. Thanks for listening, and we'll be on next week with a new guest, a gentleman running for county sheriff in Lee County, talking about crime in America. Thanks for joining us.
And we'll also be talking about Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton and their first debate, which should be one of the most viewed events in American history.
Super. Good night.
You've been listening to Two Guys from Verona with Dan Perkins and Don Mazzella. For more information about Dan and Don, please visit twoguysfromverona.com. Tune in again next week to hear two guys from Verona give their unique take on today's world. Until then, have a great day, and remember to keep faith in America.